A little bit about Eric's background. He is currently at the New York Times. He is a staff food writer born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. He worked his way through the literary and culinary world to eventually become a digital manager at Food Network and a senior editor at Food 52. This is his first book, but he has written a number of articles that you've probably seen through lots of publications, including Washington Post, of course the New York Times, Food and Wine, and Bon Appetit. He lives with his rescue pup in New York City. And we're so excited that he's down back in Atlanta tonight. Now, he will be joined by his colleague. I'm back. Okay. He will be joined by his colleague, Kim Severson. She is a national food correspondent for the New York Times. Previously, the New York Times Southern Bureau Chief, and before that, a staff writer for the food section. And she won the 2018 Pulitzer Prize for Public Service for her contributions to the team that investigated sexual harassment and abuse against women. She has won 4 James Beard Awards and the Casey Medal for Meritorious Journalism for her work on childhood obesity. She's done many other wonderful things, but I know you're eager to meet our guests, so please join me in welcoming author Eric Kim, author of Korean American Food That Tastes Like Home, his mother Jean Kim, and Kim Severson.
Let's go. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hi. Oh, my goodness. Uh-oh. Well done. Well done. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to...
Grab some.
No, it's okay. You'll sit down. We'll figure it out. No, don't make your mother sit there. You come sit over here. Now, you're going to have to sit in the coffee you spilled. No, you sit right there. What is this? Okay. The son was going to make the mom sit in the coffee spill. You're just going to have to... It's dark. Nobody will see the coffee. This is fun, right? Already. We're having a good time. Thank you all. It's so nice to be here. I've done a lot of chef interviews here back in the day, and it's so great that as the pandemic is moving into whatever phase it's moving into, we can all be here together. So, and I know you've got a lot of family here. I think your dad, a little shout out to Dad. Where's Dad? Okay, and your brother, and a lot of friends, and I think your partner and your partner's family, are they? Okay, look at this. It's like a family thing. Anyway, so Eric and I worked together, and it's exciting. This book is exciting because it really bridges cultures, and it is, Eric's a really fresh new voice in food writing and food journalism, and I just think the book is terrific. But I really want to talk to your mom more, so we'll get on with it. And I think most of you know, you took a year to come back to Atlanta during the pandemic, right? And you and your mother spent a year in the kitchen together.
Yes.
And neither one of you, both of you, no one killed each other, went to jail.
Yeah.
You would tell us, was there one time where you really, you thought this is not going to work and I'm going to leave, and I want you both to answer it, and it doesn't have to be the same question. So what was your let's ask her breaking point. We're going to do some interpreting, so.
에릭이 집에 오면요, 부엌이 완전 메스업. 아침에 일어나면 그 설거지대 잔뜩 쌓여 있어요. 그리고 이제 깨끗한 카운터탑이 그 양념들로 가득 차 있고, 그래서 반갑기도 하지만 빨리 가기를 원했습니다.
So she said that.
You have to say what she really said. People will know. I won't know, but people will know.
Okay, so, I did write about this, so it's pretty public, but she really hated when I would just mess up the counters, and she likes to keep things really, really neat, really, she runs a tight ship at home, but it was really probably hard for her during, the book process because I was messing up the kitchen every day, and, but I think, for me, it was, just like, being 17 years old again, it was like really hard to go back to that role, because I think no matter what, you're always sort of the son and you're sort of the child. So I think that was something that we had to kind of not get past, but it was something that we had to sort of leave behind when we went into the kitchen, I think, because when we got into the kitchen, then I was the one who was cooking and sort of, trying to write a book. And, but, it was it's pretty chill, I thought. But she was really glad when I left.
Yeah, there you go. There is something about, and I think many people have probably tried to get recipes out of a family member, and they're like, well, you're just like, how much? Well, they're like enough. You put in enough. I'm like, what is enough? How long do you cook it till it's done? And so it can be very hard for someone who cooks with, what is the phrase you were just telling me, and
손맛.
Sommat, which is cooking heart and hand, right? And so it's a very difficult process. So were you, how did you quantify what you were doing? Would you say, measure this, or did you just expect him to learn by your side? How did you teach him your recipes?
저는 레시피가 없어요. 그냥 제가 만든 소스도 있고 이제 제 식대로 하는데 이제 에릭이 책을 만든다니까 레시피를 만들었죠. 그래서 한 6번, 7번 정도씩 해본 것 같아요. 제가.
She
그러면
said,
그러면 또 에릭이 또 해보고 자기가 고칠 거는 고치고 그렇게 했습니다.
she's saying that I don't have recipes. I just have my specialties like sauces and stuff. So throughout the book process, it was because we have to measure it. She sort of learned how to use the measuring spoons and actually it was really sweet. You know, there was a point where she would be like, I don't know, this much, and it'd be like a tablespoon measure, like a half tablespoon measure or something. And eventually, she did learn and became a recipe developer on her own, I think. And yeah, and then so she would make them over and over, write it down, and then I would test it myself, and then we'd kind of meet in the middle that way. That's sort of what happened.
When you were growing up, did you realize what you had, or so many immigrant kids they're stuck between American food and the food of their home countries, their parents' home countries. Did you know what you had, the specialness that you had here, or were you one of those kids that was like, I will only eat Burger King and Pringles, and I hate my parents? Some people are like that.
I think you take things for granted when you're little, and I totally took the Korean food for granted, and but my mom wasn't, a dictator or anything. We did have McDonald's once in a while, and we went out to eat, but it wasn't until I got much older, I would say late 20s really, when I finally kind of started to crave Korean food and really appreciate it. And but yeah, it is an interesting thing when you kind of realize that the food that you grew up with and that you took for granted was actually really, really special. And it had nuances and it had stories that you could tell through those dishes. And also those dishes, when you go into the cultural history behind them, tell the story of you. That was like a really lovely moment for me. And I think for us too, we were chatting about each recipe and kind of excavating like old memories that we had forgotten about. And I heard plenty of stories of her childhood that I had never heard. And so the thesis statement for my book that I always kind of like to tell people is write down those recipes, because the conversations that happen are really why you do it, I think. Yeah.
Did it bring up memories of, you've never met your grandmother on this side. When you were looking, because you learned how to cook from her, right?
엄마,
저희 엄마는 제가 미들 스쿨 때 돌아가셨어요. 그리고 제가 5 시스터입니다. 그래서 제가 막내고 그래서 언니들한테 많이 배웠고, 근데 결혼해서 미국에 왔을 때는 저도 음식을 할 줄 몰랐습니다. 근데 이제 주위의 커즌들이나 뭐 저희 그 마더인로, 저희 어머니한테 많이 배웠고, 그리고 우리 에릭 큰엄마, 큰엄마들 하시는 거 보고 배우고. 근데 처음부터 요리하는 건 참 재밌었던 것 같아요. 제가 좋아했습니다. 뭐 밖에서 뭘 먹으면은 그걸 집에 와서 만들어 보고 싶고, 그래서 해보고, 사람들하고 나누어 먹는 것도 좋아하고, 그래서 많이 늘은 것 같아요. 요리를 잘하는 것 같지는 모르지만.
She's being humble, but she said that. Well, I'll translate, but first, she's saying that I don't think I'm that good, but I got better because I would try to replicate dishes after I came home from a restaurant meal and try to recreate those. But in her community, she is known as the cook. She's like really. I mean, there are friends here like nodding. Yeah, so
True?
cute.
Okay.
They're like doing this. She's known as the cook, and she makes kimchi for everyone, and she's really good. But what she said was she said that her mom passed away when she was in middle school, so she didn't really learn from her own mother. But she's the youngest of 5 sisters, so she learned from the older sisters. One of the sisters is here, and she learned from these.
That's your sister?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She learned from these incredible cooks, and I think she also said that she really enjoys cooking and it's fun for her.
So when you were teaching him recipes, did it bring up memories, things you hadn't thought about? Is there one dish that you really felt like was a dish that you grew up with that you gave to him as a gift? I don't know how you translate that.
계란밥?
Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, please
그
do.
내용.
계란밥은 그냥 쉽죠. 그리고 아직도 어떤 때 반찬이 없고 그러면은 저희 남편한테도 해줍니다. 계란 후라이하고 참기름 넣고 깨소금 넣고 김가루 넣고.
She's talking about keranbap, which is when you fry an egg and then you put it in over like a bowl of rice with sesame oil and soy sauce. And she was saying that even for her husband, my dad, when she doesn't want to cook, she'll make that for him, and it like really hits the spot. It's so good. But there's a story. There was a huge essay actually before the keranbap recipe in the book, but we had to cut it. We had to cut it for space, but we have the person whose story it is, so she can tell us.
엄마 어렸을 때?
Oh.
Putting her on the spot a little.
제가 아주 아기 때 근데 성격이 항상 이렇게 좀 조용한 스타일인데 아기 때 저도 저희 엄마가 계란밥을 해줬겠죠. 그래서 제가 아기 때 몰래 계란을 비벼가지고 밥을 했는데 엄마가 들어온 거예요 갑자기. 그러니까 그게 무서워서 왜 무서워했는지 그거 모르겠어요. 무서워서 어디 장 밑에다가 숨겨놨어요. 그랬는데 이사 갈 때 그게 막 곰팡이가 껴가지고 발견됐던 그런 기억이 있습니다. 그러니까 계란밥은 굉장히 오래된 것 같아요. 예, 어렸을 때부터 먹었던 것 같아요.
That's the one story I always remember too. Like she would tell that story when I was younger, and parents they always like tell the same story, like as if you haven't heard it already. But she can't understand that. But I can say whatever I want. Just kidding. Okay. But no, she okay. when she was little, 몇 살이었어?
3 or 4 years old.
So when she was like 3 or 4, her mom was probably working, and she tried to make keranbap. And I remember her telling the story this way, like she had too much soy sauce in it, 간장 너무 많이 넣었지 or something. Anyway, it didn't taste very good. And then her mom had come in, and she kind of got scared a little bit, and so she hid the bowl of keranbap under the couch or under some like furniture. And they didn't find it until months later. And it had it had really like
Genius.
monstered over and
Well done. Well done. So you, excuse me, you moved here from South Korea in 1983? Yeah?
she came over like 84,
84.
85, and my dad was here first. Though,
And
in
your dad was
83.
here first.
Yeah.
When you came here, and I imagine this Atlanta in 1984, the grocery items that you were familiar with in South Korea were not here. It was probably a challenge to find, I think you mentioned in the book, even things like soy sauce, fish sauce. So how did your cooking change, or how did you have to substitute with what you had to work with on the American grocery store shelf? We didn't have H Mart then, did we?
그때 저희가 왔을 때는 이렇게 그로서리가 하나가 있었어요. 조그만 거. 지금은 없어졌고. 그런데 우리 거기에서 장을 봐서 하는 것도 있고, 그리고 한국에서 우리 그 마더인로 시어머님께서 다 가지고 오셨어요. 그리고 된장 고추장을 저희가 패밀리가 많아요. 된장 고추장을 항상 집에서 담그셨어요. 그 담그셔서 이렇게 커전들 다 나눠주고 그 고추장이 지금도 제가 냉장고 안에 있어요. 옛날에 그 저기 에릭이 썼죠. 그 스토리를. 근데 아빠를 그거 한번 꺼내주면 엄마 생각나서 울 줄 알았는데 그날 안 울었던 것 같아요. 감동적일 줄 알았는데.
She's funny, huh? Go ahead.
She's witty. Okay, I'll try to translate that while adding my flourishes, as I do. My family actually always makes fun of me for whenever I write head notes about, about family memories or something. They're like, "Did this really happen, Eric?" I'm like, "Yeah," but I think okay. So what she said was, when they first immigrated here, there was maybe one Korean grocery store, but not really many. It's not like it wasn't like it is now, with the H Marts and everything on Buford Highway right now. But so in order to cook the Korean dishes, she had to get the ingredients from our grandma, so from my dad's mom, because she would visit every year, once or twice. And when she came, she had I don't know, I remember it was 4 huge body size bags. And they were filled with food. They were filled with tenjang and gochujang and gochugaru and I don't know how she got them through, but she did. She just
Different
looked
times. That was different times. Yeah.
She looked like a harmless, old lady. But she was just also telling the story about how, that grandma. We have a lot of family here. We have a lot of cousins and uncles and aunts, and everyone sort of put their roots in Georgia. At least my dad's side of the family, and so. What that meant was the grandma would come and sort of pass out the tenjang and gochujang, and everyone would have it. And our grandma stayed with us, and I actually remember that's another thing I took for granted. I never asked her about it, but I wish I had. But she would make tenjang and gochujang from scratch. It's crazy. She would grow perilla in the backyard, and
청국장
That's crazy.
ooh, 청국장. 청국장 is tenjang, but a little more fermented and.
Wow.
Power. But and then she said that she told the story about the 10-year-old gochujang, which she was talking about how she still has
The what now? I'm sorry. Say
Oh, she still has my grandma's gochujang.
Oh, really?
From,
Can you explain a little bit for people who might not know what that is?
Yeah, gochujang is a fermented chili paste. It's red and spicy, and I think it's on many menus now. But it's something that it's fermented, so you can keep it for a while, and it was in the freezer for 10 years. Our grandma passed away 10 years ago, and so we brought that out, and the joke that she made was that we were trying to manipulate the situation to get my dad to cry and have a moment, and he didn't really, and he didn't cry, but I don't know. I do think that moment was really resonant. It was so maybe he didn't cry because we should ask him. He's right there, but. Maybe
In the question and answer session, which we'll have after, we'll ask you about crying with the, okay.
But maybe he didn't cry because I remember it felt really surreal. It's wild. I remember what he said though was, it's crazy that I'm eating this right now. I didn't think I would have this again. So I think it was shock probably or a little bit of that.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I did manipulate the situation by posting about it on Twitter.
Everything's material, friend. Just got to keep moving that content.
The joke my mom always tells me is to never tell me anything, otherwise it'll end up in a story. But, yeah. And then that went really, really viral, and then other people commented under it, and they were like, "Well, actually, our grandpa before he died, he made this bottle of wine, and we saved it for 60 years and opened it." And there were hundreds of stories like that, and it was a really cool moment that I filmed it. I filmed my reaction to it because I was I feel like I'm going crazy. This is such a weird experience. I don't know. Anyway, and then I had my interview with Sam right after that.
That's right. So who's our boss who hired him and hired me, actually, Sam Sifton, who invented NYT cooking, for example. And I hope you all use NYT cooking because you'll find many of Eric's recipes there. It's amazing what a food that somebody made and they're gone, what that passes. It's just amazing what food passes on to us. And that's what you two have done here. And it's amazing. I mean, it's, anyway, so I want to talk to you a little bit more about ingredients. Asha Gomez, who I don't know if you all know her, she's a chef in town who did a great cookbook called My Two Souths, and she talked about southern India, Kerala, where she's from, and cooking in the American South, and how her dishes kind of take both things. And she, she does, she does a beautiful black pepper carrot cake that has the black pepper from the region she's from, the Telecherry pepper. It's a brilliant cake, and it sort of merges things. There's some, in the book, for example, because you have a lot of jalapeno, because your family likes the flavor of jalapeno, because that's what you could get here, right? Are there other, and then you also have grits, and you have a fried chicken recipe. You have a really interesting grits recipe. Were you cooking Southern dishes with a Korean touch, or Korean dishes with a Southern touch growing up, or are these your inventions?
I think those specifically are my inventions, but my mom did have dishes that she cooked that we never really questioned. We were like, why the heck do we eat Argentine empanadas every Christmas?
Oh, tell us about Judy's empanadas.
Judy 대해서 그 empanada 내용 있나?
아, 제 친구의 주디 엄마라고 있는데, 주디 엄마 이거 봐야 될 것 같네요. 근데 아르헨티나에서 살았어요. 그 친구가. 그래서 가끔 그거를 이렇게 만들어서 저를 10개, 뭐 5개 이렇게 주면 우리 애들이 너무 잘 먹는 거예요. 그래서 제가 배웠어요. 근데 이제 애들이 뉴욕이나 LA에서 이렇게 오면 그거 뭐 먹고 싶니? 그러면 엠파나다 엄마 만들어 달라고. 그러면 이제 그거 만들어서 얼려 갖고 애들 갈 때도 보내고 참 맛있어요. 한번 따라 해보세요.
She's just telling the story of our family friend Judy. She came from Argentina and would give my mom empanadas, like maybe 10 at a time, and we would eat them and really love them. And so eventually she learned how to make it herself. And then, the real genius of those empanadas, though, is they have a hard-boiled egg in it and like a single olive. Sometimes you do two if you really want that olive flavor, but it like tastes like a savory. It reminds me of like a martini. Like you're eating it, and if you're lucky, you have the olive at the other side of it, so that when you get to the last bite, it's the olive bite, because she tucks it into the very end of the end of the empanada. Anyway, for some reason, it's our like Christmas thing, and I think it's because I come home for Christmas, maybe like, and then I have to drive up to New York because I have a dog, and I try to not fly when I can, and it's the thing that she fries like 10 or 11. And then I'm able to take it, and I eat like 5 or 6 because they're really substantial, really like meaty and lots of vegetables, and they don't go bad because they're just like contained and fried, and so I eat those. I eat like 1 every hour, and then and I don't have to worry about like stopping at a burger place or anything. And then there's a fridge at the hotel, and then I'm able to, or the motel, and I'm able to like. On the second leg, so it tastes like 2 legs usually, and I eat the rest of the empanadas in that leg, and so empanadas sustain me for 48 hours, but
right.
it feels very normal to me because it's just like.
Well, it's also a great thing about this book is that you're sort of going along, and then you come across like the empanadas or things like your roasted seaweed grits, or even you have a baked potato recipe in there that. Tell me what's in the baked potato recipe. This is like your single man in an apartment at Tuesday night recipe.
But actually, inspired by my mom, the only addition I made was caramelizing some kimchi in sesame oil, because that's just like a nice like thing to do. Mm-hmm. Cooked kimchi is so much different than fresh kimchi, but that is a nice topping over a baked potato. But what my mom does is, 엄마 baked potato.
She's like, whatever.
She's like, I don't care about that. No, I don't know if you remember this, but like we would go to like Ryan's or Sweet Tomatoes, or like, I don't know if it was an Asian thing, but we just like love buffets. And
Sweet Tomato.
Sweet Tomato's great. It's closed. Yeah, so sad. Anyway, actually, okay, whatever. So the baked potato though, that was probably, I think about this all the time. Like writing this book was all about looking back and thinking like, oh my God, like my introduction to a baked potato was probably Ryan's buffet or something like that. And And so I would watch her make a baked potato, and she would put the sour cream and cheese and the scallion, but then sugar. So sugar was her. She just said a lot of sugar. And I think a lot of people would be like, "That's really weird," but it really slaps. It tastes good.
Pro tip.
Anyway, so that's why the kimchi baked potato has a little sugar in the.
I want to put the green onion. Yeah.
So
That's
good.
lovely.
And then you just like mix it up, and it's kind of like chive mashed potatoes, a
Yeah.
cheesy situation.
That's
and
good.
it's
That's good.
And the little sugar just really balances everything. My mom put sugar in a lot of things. 엄마 설탕.
Why? Just use the white sugar or different kinds of sugar? Okay, good. Why not?
'Cause it's good.
Yellow sugar.
I don't have yellow sugar. She just reminded me. Thank you very much. I see what you're up against. So there are the recipes in the book that you think are kind of weird, like the merging, the fusion-y recipes.
Recipe.
You can tell nobody. We won't tell anybody. Just tell us.
에릭이 레시피를 만드는데 어떤 때는 제가 에릭을 혼내요. 이거는 헬스푸시 아니다. 어? 그래서 이렇게 하면 안 된다. 좀 이거 대신 이걸 넣으면 안 되니 하는데 에릭은 모든 아메리칸들이 쉽게 구할 수 있는 크로거나 퍼블릭스에서 이렇게 H마트 가기가 어렵다는 거예요. 그래서 거기에서 구할 수 있는 걸로 하더라고요. 근데 맛은 괜찮아요. 뭐 소금 앤 후추 위주로. 근데 그래서 가끔 이거는 헬스푸드 아니니까 책에 안 내면 안 돼. 뭐 이런 것도 있습니다.
Sounds like a lot of things that she didn't like.
Okay, I'm gonna add my flourishes. Just kidding. She was just saying that there were moments when I think later in her life she was cooking. Well, translating's hard. So all I want to do is like say it in my own words.
Yeah.
It's a whole profession. Translation actually isn't supposed to be word for word. Did you know that? Anyway, it's about interpreting. No, so she would cook certain things with syrups or like instead of sugar, or she would. I think when I was developing things with a lot of I think I cook with a lot of sugar, a lot of like brown sugar and maple syrup and stuff. And I think there were moments where she was like, "This is really unhealthy. Like, should we put it in the book?" And I think that's all she was saying.
But in the what now?
Put it in the book. Like,
that
should we put these unhealthy?
That they shouldn't go in because it seemed unhealthy. I
Yeah,
see.
especially because there are like all these syrups and alternatives that she uses, and actually a lot of Korean home cooks use now.
There's one particular, right? That
Meshichang,
yeah.
There's this plum syrup that's really good, and so that was actually a really big moment for me to stop gatekeeping her like cooking, and I got to a place where we tasted side by side the versions with granulated sugar and then the versions with like that esoteric syrup. But then I got to a point where I was like, the syrup one was better. It had like a nuance to it. It was like fruity and tart, and that was just sugar. And sometimes you do just want sugar, but sometimes that was better. And so I think that was a nice moment when I started letting her use the meshichang and
Yeah. Did you feel pressure to be like the Korean cook guy and have them be just right? And did you feel pressure that from other people in your family or all the Koreans in the world who think you're not doing it right? I mean, how did you break free from that? Because I think a lot of cooks in your situation feel a burden or pressure.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. This is not a therapy session.
I don't think I ever told you this. I don't think I even told you this. But when I was, it was maybe the third month, being there, and I had just started talking to the Times, and I was working on a piece about panchan, and it was the second piece I was working on, and I was so worried about authenticity. I was like, oh man, I hope I don't piss off the Koreans. I hope I do this right. I hope I get this right. And because I was so worried, I got shingles. I gave myself shingles, and I thought it was something else, but
Right when you started with us?
it was actually a freelance piece at the time, but I had started interviewing for for the
Okay.
Times, I think. But the piece turned out great. It was pretty, but it was like I remember that was the moment when I was like, oh my God, something has to change. Like, and so I was always scared of being assigned another like time story. Is this just like the pressure of it? But I think I had to go through that. And my mom helped me a lot. She was the one who was like, "Oh, you're always gonna have haters. Like, F them." And she just, she really was like that. She was like, "Oh, who cares about those people? You should just, do what you're doing." But we checked each other a lot. It was a lot of moments where she would be like, "Well, Koreans don't do it like that," and I'd be like, "Well, this is a Korean American book." And
Yeah, it's Korean American. That's a whole nother thing, right?
there's a constant reminding each other of what we're actually doing, and that was also a process. Like, it was a development of kind of deciding what kind of book I wanted to write, and getting rid of the pressure to be like authentically Korean. And I actually think I ended up going the whole other way. Like, for instance, there was a bulgogi in there that it was like really authentic. It was like soy sauce and pear, and it had all these things, and it had some of my flourishes, but I just didn't like it that much. And bulgogi 많이 만들었잖아, right? I made it so many times, but then I had this really weird version with lemon pepper. It was like a dry rubbed bulgogi.
We all know the lemon pepper. We're from Atlanta.
And I loved that version because it told the story of Atlanta, but I was really scared of that recipe. I was like, I don't know if I think I'm gonna get canceled if I do that. There's a lot of that.
Did you?
No.
Yeah,
It was
see?
really popular. And then my mom was the one who was like, that's the one I like the most. So.
Yeah.
근데 에릭이 어떤 땐 찌개에 버러를 넣어요.
What'd you say?
근데 그거는 진짜 저도 이렇게 먹어보고 싶지가 않거든요. 근데 먹어보면 맛있어요.
Just that sometimes I put butter in jigaes and like the stews, which are kind of supposed to be like refreshing and like clean, but
Tastes good.
but then she would take a bite, and it was a lot of that, honestly. It was a lot of her being like, "Oh, that's not gonna work," and then that would fuel me to be like,
And she was like,
"Just
"Oh, it
you
tastes
wait."
good." Right. Nice. I think that's what's really cool about this book is that you are actually creating, you're defining what it is to be a Korean American cook, and you're breaking ground. I think there is, and I'm curious about what you think about both of you. It's a little bit of a food trend to throw some kimchi on a taco and call it a thing, or we're going to have bulgogi, whatever. Like, it's just because you put a Korean ingredient on something doesn't make it Korean, right? So is it a good trend or a bad trend? Should we embrace the kimchi taco or not?
Man,
That's such a white girl question.
No, it's a great question. I thought about it every day because what is my kimchi baked potato like? How's that different than someone else's, especially like a white chef or something? But I really think I always get out of trouble, or I get myself out of trouble by writing myself out of trouble. So I think with the head notes, it was a lot of room to explain. And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm splitting hairs, but I think the difference that I found in the recipes I was doing, I actually just said this to my dad this morning. Like, he was like, "Oh yeah, you're kind of doing like fusion food." And I was like, "No, I think it's not fusion. Like, fusion's when you like put two things together that, just to like make something brand new." But I think for me, it was these dishes, they all had reference. Like the gochugaru shrimp and grits, I like to, like that one, the shrimp is marinated in the way that a meontang is marinated, or the meontang is seasoned with like fish sauce and gochugaru, and then the grits are seasoned in the way that we would season chuk, which is with like sesame oil and a little kim. And so there was always a reason for each thing that I did. Even the baked potato had, a mom story about like her buffet baked potato. Yeah, so I felt like, I think it's probably splitting hairs, but I think it's always a good thing to just like play with your food, but I also think it's important probably to give context and to give
So it's really
credit.
intention and
Intention,
really,
maybe?
sort of intention behind something you're doing, or it makes sense. We're going to go to questions, Claire, but as she's raised your hand, I'm going to ask one more question. How proud are you of your son? It's Mother's Day, What do you think? I mean, Korean moms are hard.
I need a present.
She said, I need a present? Nice. Does someone have a question? Don't be shy. We'll have a discussion. This will be fun.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi. So going to what you were saying about kids just taking so many things for granted, I think I totally agree. And one of the things that I took for granted were my parents as a child. And so I wanted to say thank you to Miss Jean and tell her Happy Mother's Day. Thank you for being here. It's really special. And my question to Eric is, what kind of advice can you give a basic white girl who's wanting to dive into these recipes but feels like a little bit of intimidation or, maybe a desire to honor the culture without overstepping or, making a complete fool of herself asking for a friend?
I appreciate
Lovely.
how
Thank you.
earnest that question was. I want, I just moderated a talk last night with my friend Rick, and he's someone who's like, it's your kitchen, do whatever you want, and blah, blah, blah. I think I'm a little more controlling, but I don't want to be, but I think what I do want to say is, if you read it, if you read the book, if you read it at like a book, which, you don't really read cookbooks like that usually, but I don't know, I think I thought really hard about the order of everything, and so I think if you read it like a book, by the time you get to that first recipe, I think you're going to feel really confident.
Well, and your first recipes are kind of sandwiches, really, or hand food. Do you call them TV dinner food?
They're TV dinners,
Yeah,
yeah.
so they're easy, Are there, just to follow up on that, for people who maybe their pantries are not at all Korean, right? And we all have the pantries we grew up with, whatever, are there, maybe this isn't a right number, but are there 3 things you should go and buy right away to get in your kitchen to start cooking Korean? What are the 3 things you would send people to the store to get?
That's a great question, which I say in the pantry section.
Which if you buy the book, you'll have,
I think I say, if I remember correctly, I say you can't start cooking from this book without buying a bag of gochugaru.
I'll say that. Explain what that is for people.
Gochugaru is a Korean red pepper powder. It's sort of closer to an Aleppo pepper. It's not really like a chili flake, but it's in so much of Korean food. I think it was really wonderful when I started cooking through this book, and I experienced the power of it, or harnessed the power. And I wanted to teach that because I wasn't really cooking with gochugaru either before this book. A lot of this, I think that's what I really wanted to say actually before, which is that this book documents my own discovery of this food and these ingredients, because I wasn't cooking Korean food really before this book, and I'm still not an expert. She's the expert. I'm not, and I'll never pretend to be. But I think the memoir form also lets you do that. I think I like writing in the first person, not because I'm talking about my life, but because I want the person reading it to feel like they're in the seat, and so I think you'll feel very guided throughout it because I was also going through that. And because like I said, I got shingles in the beginning of it from the anxiety, and then I came out shiny and new. But
He's not saying you'll get shingles with the first recipe.
But yeah, gochugaru is just really wonderful, and my mom blooms it in oil.
Because you can't just throw it in.
Yeah, you don't really want to just throw it in stuff. I like to bloom it in fat because then it really the flavors really come out. But I started doing it in butter because as that kind of comes together, it starts to smell like a caramel. It's and you really smell the pepper as a fruit, and you're like, wow, this is incredible. It starts to smell like almost like a butterscotch or something. And it's because the gochugaru is that flavorful. I just want people to know that flavor. Gochujang is made out of gochugaru, and gochujang is the paste version of that. And that is really popular, in quote-unquote mainstream, I think, because of bibimbap. The word bibimbap was added to the dictionary before gochujang was, and I think about that order a lot, and I think it's because once people knew bibimbap, they knew what gochujang was because that's the sauce that you use for it. Okay. So gochujang, doenjang is something that I'm trying to make sure everyone
hyping up.
I'm trying to hype it up. I want everyone to know about it because it's really, really special, and you're gonna see the next 5 recipes I have coming out in NYT Cooking are all just doenjang recipes.
Okay, great.
So yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, another question. Thank you. That was a great question. We're going to stay focused so everybody gets their questions answered. Sorry. I'm doing the worst moderating job ever. I'm so tell me more about that. Okay, go ahead.
So especially with your mom being here, I'm making the natural connection to Priya Krishna at New York Times as well, and her mother and writing Indianish. And then, of course, you mentioned Rick's book came out this week, Rick Martinez. So I'd love to hear like what you learned from close colleagues when you wrote this, like any advice you got from them, and perhaps like were you working together, or like how are you helping each other if you were, like as you're all going through this?
Yeah, I was very inspired by Priya's book. I try to say that as much as I can because she wrote this incredible, book called Indianish, and I remember it was just so unbridled, and it was so her, and it was so unapologetically not authentic Indian. It was like this is our food, and that is authentic to us, and so that like sparked this thing in me, and I was like, oh, I'd love to do that with my mom. And then I will say Priya really helped me with this whole writing about your own culture's cuisine thing. The very first piece I wrote for the Times was about kimchi, and I got actually like this woman emailed Emily directly and was like, this piece whitewashed kimchi and blah blah blah, and it had all this like stuff about like it had so many errors, and it didn't have errors, but I was so terrified. I was like, oh my god, I didn't know there were mean people out there. And I called Priya and I was like,
Ask Maggie Haberman about that. She'll tell you. Yeah. So, anyway, but yeah, go ahead.
But she I got on the phone with her and she was like, I was so devastated, and she was like, Eric, like, welcome to the club. And then that started a chain of tweets. Nick Sharma posted something about this. Samin responded to it, and so it's sort of this. It was really lovely. It was kind of like an initiation. I was like, oh, okay, we all have to go through this a little bit. It's like, and then it's how you come out the other end of it. I think now I'm really, really, really belligerent towards those people now, and just like with a lot of confidence, I'm like, yeah, this isn't, Korean food from Korea in 2022, but it's kind of actually a lot of Korean food from the 80s because that's when my parents came over. And then, so it's sort of like something that Nigella does a lot, which is like, she says like, yeah, people think this, and then maybe it's like feigning the humility, and then she's like, but actually in 1976, she like cites like with that research, and and that's what I learned at the Times. It's like how to be airtight in your reporting about a dish, even if that dish, especially if that dish is that close to you in your culture.
Well done. Yes, another question. Where are we? Oh, there you are.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say I apologize if you've already answered this question in the book. I bought the book as a part of this event, so I've not had a chance to read it. But with this book, you've taken on something so large and intimate as putting out something that is tied to your identity. And first of all, it's from your perspective, but then let alone you're tying your mom into that. Can you talk about how you navigated that with your mom? And I'd also love to hear your mom's perspective of how that navigation went and how that first conversation went. Because I feel like I've read before that this book was originally something very different than it turned out to be because of COVID.
Yeah, well, it first started out as it was going to be a more reported thing because, again, I was terrified to write about Korean food, so I wanted to be as far away from it as possible. I was going to be like a third-person reporter and going to different people's homes, and the pandemic meant that it was about my family after that, because it was about our house, and we were all just quarantined. And in terms of like writing about family, I'll say that I first wrote about them in an essay about coming out to my parents, and that was like a very like public way to talk about something very private. But I think that was the first time I experienced okay, and like this, I think there is a way to write about your family, but still honor their their image, their being, and their respect. I think permission is important. I learned that after that piece. But I also think, But I also think, it was a lot of talking. It was a lot of us sitting at the kitchen counter and me being like, "Are you okay with me putting that in there?" And she'll be like, "Yeah, whatever." And then I think she like doesn't, she's pretty like chill about everything. And
Is your mom a fairly private person?
I'm a private person.
And so was she concerned about having things in the book?
Yeah, it's like that. I just like asked it in English. I just realized I did that. Okay, so like sometimes in a Korean American household, it's like you'll just be saying something like, "Hey, do you want some pizza?" And they're like, "What?" And it's like, "Do you want some pizza?" And then they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I want some pizza." And I was like, "Okay." Anyway, 엄마는 what's private in Korean? 다른 사람들 엄마에 대해서 아는 거 싫어 아니면 괜찮아? 싫어.
And were there things in the book she wasn't prepared to put in until later? That's kind of where we were going with that, right? Like, how do you navigate that?
First, how do you navigate this with having such a large proportion of not just yourself, but someone else?
Right.
And then the boundaries with that, and then
Right.
leading on to what you're talking about.
I'll get that. Hold on. Do you want to? Go ahead, take the call. We'll wait. That's good.
No, everyone take out their everyone.
처음에는 알려지는 게 이렇게 알려질 줄 몰랐죠. 그냥 책 하고 싶어 하니까 하다가 뭐 안 팔릴 수도 있는 거고 스탑할 수도 있는 거고. 그리고 얘가 하고 싶어 하니까 뭐 그냥 하나보다 뭐 이래 신경을 안 썼는데 이러면 이렇게 알려지잖아요. 근데 처음에는 그런 게 약간은 좀 두려운 것도 있었죠. 근데 지금은 어쩔 수가 없어요. 다 정말 다른 분들이 먼저 와서 인사를 하니까 이제는 좋은 것 같아요.
Oh.
네.
Okay, how do I translate that? I think she's always been very open, actually. And like I said before, her joke was always like, "Don't tell Eric anything, or it's going to be in a story," which means she tells me everything, and she like secretly wants everything in the story. But I think what she was also saying was, at first she was a little anxious about it. It's like, but then also she was like, "Well, maybe the book won't sell." That's why everyone laughed. Make her laugh.
Good
Okay.
plan.
And then she was eventually just like, people started walking up to her first, and then I think she started to see what it was, and she was like, "Oh, this is cool."
Nice.
근데 저기 책이 나오고 보니까 그 책 안에 있는 제 사진들이 이렇게 나올 줄 알았으면 제가 좀 고를 걸. 좀 몰랐어요. 이렇게 책에 사진이 이렇게 많이 나오는 줄. 에릭이 몰래 가져갔나 봐요.
She didn't realize that she would be so much in the book.
Ah,
Yeah, her pictures.
she would have asked for a bigger cut of the advance,
Yeah.
probably. Right. Do you have another? Yeah. Thank you.
So you mentioned that you went through a long process of figuring out like exactly how the recipe would go. Is there one recipe in the book that you went through like the most revision or took the most time to figure out the measurements and how exactly you would
Yeah.
play out?
What was the hardest recipe? Right.
불고기하고 잡채.
She said that the bulgogi and the japchae.
불고기하고 잡채가 저한테는 쉬워요. 근데 저는 금방 만드는데 우리 에릭은 약간 그 아메리칸들한테 맞는 잡채를 연구하느라고 많이 해보더라고요. 그래서 어려워했어요. 불고기도 한국식으로 제가 하는 식으로 하면 금방 하죠. 근데 디프런카인을 좀 하느라고.
Yeah, I think she's saying from her perspective, it seemed like the japchae and the bulgogi were hard. I think for me, it was because those are so iconic, and I was like, what do I have to say about that? And so those were hard for me in that sense. But it's probably the milk bread. The milk bread is just, it's bread, so it was just, I made that so many times, which was fine because we got to eat bread every day.
Another question?
So much. I've got 3 high school students in front of me, and I'm hoping you to address your response to them. But you've touched a little bit on this in terms of dealing with sort of the pressures and parameters of like writing for an audience. And I feel like in high school these days, students are very much like trying to write for a grade and are not necessarily developing their own voice, which is something I think you've done beautifully here. Could you talk a little bit more about how you've found your written voice
a great
to these
question.
3?
Wow, that's a great question. Also, hello. Thank you for coming, all of you.
Hi, high school students.
Adorable high school students. Okay. You know, I had a Zanga, I think. I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. I journaled a lot when I was younger, but you know what I'll really say in all seriousness is that I practiced at various like editorial jobs, I think, and it was nice when I knew that not that many people were like reading it, because then, but it was like still public, so I was held accountable, so that was nice. And it doesn't have to be like a staff job at like a publication, but it can be I really think it can be an Instagram caption. Like I really was practicing food writing in the very beginning in my Instagram captions. I was like a grad student, just cooking dinners for myself, and I really wanted to. I was sort of like practicing there. It was public enough, but not that many people were following me at the time. And then, and I think it wasn't until I started writing this column called Table for One, and that was really where I was figuring out what, like, the potential of a first-person essay. And my joke is always that, like, right now, I'm running on an hour of sleep because I've had, like, all these assignments due, and I've been, like, traveling and running around. And
You were partying, too, last night.
I was out with
Kids,
friends.
it's also fun. Okay.
But my point is that I don't think it ever changes. Like, you're always gonna have an essay due, and it's always like
The
you're
worst
always
feeling.
procrastinating, and it's always like you always like lose sleep over it. And anyway, I think the essays that you're writing now for school, that's a form. That's like a literary form that you're gonna keep using in your life, and you don't have to become like a writer to use it. But the first person essay is just a really great way to not just express yourself, but talk about the world around you. I think once I found this happy medium between like not oversharing, like only sharing what I need to, and I think that also takes time to like figure out what you don't want shared. Like I have some old columns that are really cringy to me because I like overshared. But now, I think finding that balance and kind of finding a form that really works for you. Maybe it's poetry, maybe it's like I don't know.
Because you did some poetry and some songwriting, right?
Yeah, I was a songwriter.
And so you play with he was going to be a pop star, but just finding different ways to use words, I think matters. And then also every time if you read something you really like you just, just notice why you like it. Like it doesn't matter what it is. Just start to notice why did I like that? Because they did their sentences this way, or they were funny, or they moved. How did they make me cry at the end of this? Just start noticing. Just play with words is really the way you do it, right?
I think reading a lot is really important. Mm-hmm. Actually, can we ask you? So we have this amazing New York Times reporter here. How did you find that form?
I really like to communicate, and so from early on, in fact, it was in high school, I was just like such a screw up in high school and was just like smoking dope and being in trouble. And we had a weekly journalism program at my high school, and I went in, I had a journalism advisor who said, you're great, I want you to be here, but you got to clean it up. And so I did, and just started writing at the newspaper, and I found the power of information. I had older brothers, and when I told on them, I had power, so I learned the power of information. And I just did it a lot. Really, it's practice. It's a craft. It's practice. It's like you just have to write, even if it's crummy, and then it'll get better, and then it'll get better. So just don't be afraid. It doesn't have to be perfect. And also realize you could throw away your first sentence. I sit down there, and I'm like, got to write a story every time, and I'm like, well, I'll just write something. All right, the dog is asleep, and then write the story. And somehow, just writing that first sentence gives me a trigger to be able to start writing. So just sit down and say, what do I want to say? Write something stupid, and then the writing will come.
What I also want to say though is there's always that high school English teacher who's like it's like the inspirational high school English teacher trope, and it's always that guy who's like, you're different. You're gonna be a creative.
Special.
So
if you just tried harder.
So look for that person. But I think for me, that person really told me this. She said, Miss Upton told me. She was like, the Eric I know. Sorry. She was like, you gotta have one of those little like crying moments in one of the talk. Anyway, she was like, the Eric I know always expresses himself through words. So she was like, write it down, whatever's happening to you. At the time, I was like lamenting something like dramatic in my life, and she was the English teacher I went to for help. So anyway,
that's really beautiful. Yeah. Maybe a couple more. How are we doing on time? Claire, you're in charge of everything.
We're good.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Great. Hey, thank you so much for sharing these wonderful stories. So I'm wondering a little bit about kind of those moments when you're not developing a recipe or not working on something that's going to be printed. Like, what do you decide to cook when you're starving on a Tuesday after a long day of work? And are those the types of things that give you inspiration to then say, oh gosh, I got to work with this and I got to like make something of it? Or do you just want to just have a moment when you don't have to worry about that and whether you're going to write about it?
Oh my God, it's kind of like Sisyphean. It's like I want to break from work, and so I always roast a chicken. I like roasting chickens. It's like, there's no recipe. I'm just like using my hands, and that's something I enjoy doing, and the result is so lovely. And then I make stock out of it, and then of course that becomes a story. It's about like what you cook when you don't want to think about work. And then so I think for me it's been I don't shy away from the fact that it's always kind of work. And it's not a bad thing because it's the creative process, and when I am just cooking freely, that is when I get my best ideas, I think. Like the sheeppan bibimbap was from just a dinner I was cooking for my family, and I went straight to Genevieve, and my editor, and I was like, this is really delicious. I think we should do it. And then so it's sort of this interesting.
That's a great dish where you put all the kind of components for bibimbap, including 2 eggs on a sheet pan, and then you pull it out, and it's really genius. That's a really easy and great recipe to. I can't remember. It's not in the book, right? It's in the newspaper.
Yeah, there's like a version in the book, but
Okay.
but yeah. So it's sort of I'm still working through it. I'm trying to but I always want to share. I think so. Like it'll be first for me, I think, and then I'll be like, man, this is so delicious, and then I'll pitch it because I'm like.
When you are home, are you letting your mom cook, or are you cooking now that you're such a good cook?
엄마가 해주지.
Another question?
Hi there. Thank you for sharing all of your stories. I resonated with you how you shared about taking granted for our culture and our food growing up, and I also only just recently started making more Korean food during the pandemic. So like following you, in the book too, like it's given me a lot of hope and like more direction as to where to go with Korean food and how I embrace my culture going forward. My fridge is currently empty, so I need to go grocery shopping tomorrow. So if you have a recipe in your book that you would recommend someone to pick up ingredients tonight or tomorrow and have it be the first thing to make, what would it be?
Yeah, definitely. This is front of mind for me because we were just talking about it, but in the car, there's a salt and pepper pork chop with, what does it have? It has like a pamuchim, and, it's basically all the flavors of samgyeopsal, like the samgyeopsal spread, which is, I learned this recently, actually. Samgyeopsal means 3-layer meat, which is like genius. Anyway, it's pork belly, and it's usually, grilled in Korean barbecue style, and you have it with like sam and all this stuff, and there's like this scallion salad. But the way I developed that recipe is you have all those flavors in the form of like a single pork chop, like a thick cut pork chop that you dry brine. It's really simple, but I like it because it helps you taste the pork for what it is. And I think Koreans like really love the flavor of actual pork instead of, barbecue or like the saucy kinds. So I love that dish because it's really unassuming, and it's topped with a pamuchim, and you have it with rice, and then I do a little dipping sauce of sesame oil, salt, pepper, and a little brown sugar, and it'll taste familiar, to you, but it's just a little more like it's a little different because of the fact that it's a pork chop, and so I like that one a lot. Yeah, and also it's just really few ingredients.
Okay, a couple more questions. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, Eric. It's good to see you. We're all
Is this
very
a
proud of
plant
you.
in the audience?
Yeah.
Softball question.
It's not a plant, but we go back to elementary school. So everyone around here, we're all very proud of you. So thank you for all your work and everything that you're doing. It's making a huge difference. My questions are 2-part. First thing I'd love to hear is what are some of the most fulfilling parts of this chapter, creating this book, doing the tour, sharing it with so many people? And then my second question is, if you're comfortable sharing, do you have any dreams for projects in the future?
Oh, those are such great questions. Thank you. I think the thing that not to get like too serious, but like I think the thing that I've been really trying to do is not let it all pass me by. Like I'm in a different city every like other day, and I was finding myself just experiencing these amazing things for the first time, like being on TV for the first time, and like all this like crazy stuff. People like stopping me on the street, and there are all these things that are happening. But sometimes I'm so busy that I just I'm not present for it. And so I was really trying to follow, a close friend's advice to just try to stop, and I'm able to do that in Uber rides, I think, just like in between places, and then I just like bawl and like so. I think that's the fun part, the Uber rides, just to in between venues to get to like pause and not do anything and just really think about everything and be like, wow, this is so crazy and cool. But yeah, and then the next book is going to be a collection of essays. So I really want to take a break from cookbooks because this almost killed me. And
Personal essays.
personal
Yeah.
essays, kind of like a trick mirror, Gio Tolentino kind of situation, but each essay will like end with a recipe. And I just have a lot of, I think the thing that I've experienced in this last year, it's connected to your first question, I think, is like I'm noticing all these patterns. I'm really thinking a lot about like multi-plot, you know, and that's like something in novels where at the very end, like all the plot lines kind of, you know, converge at the end. And that keeps happening to me in my life. Like, I think that keeps happening to me where I'm like, whoa, this, and this. And then, for instance, and now I'm DMing with Michelle Branch. I mean, sorry. It's a deep cut for the people who know me in the audience, but like she was a hero of mine, and now we're like friends, and because she loves cooking, and so I'm trying to like examine all that, and I like making fun of it sometimes. It's like, you know, the serendipity of life, but also I think there's a lot of beauty in it, and that's something that I'm trying to write about right now. Yeah.
Great, good question. Another one. We just have two more, and then we're gonna let everybody go get their book signed if they haven't already.
Hey y'all, how's it going? 안녕하세요. I just want to say thank you so much for being here and taking questions and speaking. I'm a Korean adoptee with my sister, so the title Korean American means a lot to us. My question is like, a lot of cookbooks revolve around like nostalgia and flavors that you grew up with through your family. Like, what kind of advice would you have for Korean Americans who want to connect back with their culture through food, but don't necessarily have that history?
Such a beautiful question. There's a guy named Peter Serpico who just published a book called Learning Korean. It's a really beautifully written cookbook. He's a chef based in Philly or DC. I think it's DC. But he's a Korean adoptee. And what's really lovely is we both have this kamjatang in our books that are made with ribs. So kamjatang is usually made with neck bone. And we were both developing these Korean cookbooks without knowing each other, and then both developed a similar thing in trying to like, and I think my discovery of my Korean Americanness isn't that much different from his maybe. Like when I read his book, I think he is cooking through the same recipes, the same dishes to find himself. And I think that's something I did too as someone who, you know, is straddling two identities. And so I think, you know, I don't know, I can't speak for your experience, but I've heard from a lot of Korean adoptees who are cooking from this book, and I think cooking through the food is a really nice way to feel connected to, you know, your roots. If you want that to be, you know, part of your story, and I think that's really beautiful. It's like, however you end up there, it's like that. Yeah, anyway, it's like the Fosters is a cheesy show that I really love, but it's like it's not about where you come from; it's where you belong. And
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. Last question.
Thank you so much. The book is amazing. I guess I was thinking as you're talking about, you know, Korean American and all of these influences, but specifically being in Atlanta, being in your hometown, how has being a, you know, Southern author, an Atlanta author, shown up in your cooking and how you approach food and community?
Great question. I landed in Hartsfield-Jackson this morning, and this was my first time back since the book came out, so it still feels surreal. I'm having that thing where I'm like, I don't want it to pass me by, but it's also all happening really quickly. And, you know, I was in New York last night, just a few hours ago, and suddenly I'm here, and all these high school friends are here, and it's really bizarre and really cool and lovely. And my parents are meeting my boyfriend's, you know, parents for the first time tonight.
Huge.
And so it's really lovely.
So you chose this book event for them to meet? Dude.
Thank you for being here. But I think, you know, for me it's so different here, you know, and I think I kind of like relax a little bit, like my jaw unclenches, and it's just like there's something really nice, and I think about it all the time. The fact that I wrote this book here was really essential, I think, for it to feel, you know, for me to really be able to write it. There's something about place that's really important, and I think it's really beautiful that a bunch of Koreans get to call Atlanta home, and because a lot of us don't really have ties to the mother country, really, especially if we were born here. And so I think that is something that's really special, and kind of claiming the South as our own as well as non-white, people in this city. I feel very, it feels very empowering to put out like a shrimp and grits recipe, or to recall like lemon pepper, or because I'm just as much Georgia as Korean, I think. And my joke title for the next book is My Gay Korean Southern Catholic Memoir, because it's just like a lot of things at odds.
I think that'll sell. Yeah, it's a niche, but it should work. When you come back here, is there a restaurant that I know you talked about how Manhattan does not have as good, the Korean restaurants in Manhattan are as good here. Can you give us a couple tips? See, y'all just the whole reason you came here was to get tips somewhere to go get good Korean food.
You'll just have to read the book. Just kidding. I think there are a lot of references to restaurants in the book that really inspired some of the dishes. But
the Joy Fried Chicken.
Oh my God, yeah, I really like Joy's fried chicken. It's fried chicken and pizza. It's more like in the suburbs next in the what is it? What? John's Creek. Right. It's next to the H Mart. That one's really good. Gangnam is kind of where we go for our sushi a lot. It's a Korean-owned Japanese place. There's a lot of Korean-owned Japanese places around here, and that place has a great set menu that my mom and I like to go to. We get lunch at Gangnam, and it's a set menu, A or B, however hungry you are, and it always comes as like a course meal, and it's hobakjuk, which is that pumpkin porridge. I did a risotto inspired by that flavor, and then there's an aibap, which is like a flying fish roe, studded like rice bowl, and it's really simple. It's really just the fish roe, sesame oil, and rice, but it's so perfect. And so there's a aibap in the book that's inspired by that. So that's a meal that I've taken a lot of inspiration from, because it's just something I really like, and I think it's because of the variety.
Okay. And then because it's Mother's Day, I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for making this gift to the world. I appreciate that. And then is there any last word about those of us who are parents who can raise a kid like this? Or what's your tip? Any tip on how to raise children? How did you do it? One tip for parents on Mother's Day. One tip for moms on Mother's Day.
근데 우리 에릭은 말썽도 안 피웠고 어려서부터 진짜 예뻤어요. 그래서 이렇게 베이비 때 놀고 있어도 보고 싶은 거야. 저기에서 노는데. 그러면은 에릭 부르면 또 와서 엄마한테 이렇게 와서 보고 너무 예뻤어요. 그냥 뒷꽁치도 다 예뻤던 것 같아.
Even though the book starts with me running away from home, what she said that was making me cry is I was really sweet and pretty and cute.
Okay.
But the
공부도
book,
잘하고.
We'll see what your brother has to say about that, but okay. Anyway, listen, thank you all for coming, and let's thank our wonderful guests.
meant a lot to me. Thank you.
All right. And so, books, you're going to...
We will meet all of you out in the lobby if you would like your book signed by Eric. He will be signing
And
books.
Jean could sign them.
Is Jean
Would you
signing?
sign?
I want my book signed by Jean. Maybe. We'll see. We'll meet you all out in the lobby. Just once again, thank our guests so much, Kim Severson, Jean Kim, and Eric Kim. Thank you.
All right. Let's head off the stage. You good? Thank you.